Here I have my main exterior front, right sides together with my main exterior back. And I'm just going to line up all edges and clip them in place. Once you get to the side here, it's really important to kind of peel back this top layer here and make sure that your angled seams are lining up all the way down. And that is going to look amazing once you stitch those together and they're all aligned. It'll look really, really good. Okay. Clip all the way to the top and then do the same thing over here. Make sure that your angled edges are aligned all the way down. And then clip those in place. All right, we are going to go ahead and stitch down the side, the bottom, and the other side at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Do not stitch these cutouts here at the bottom yet. That will be a later step. Now, once you approach this slanted edge right here, it does get a bit thick for your presser foot. Your needle doesn't go through all of the layers of thickness though, so you might want to prop the side of your foot up with a hump jumper or something like that so that your foot doesn't tilt to one side. So again, your needle doesn't go through any of that thickness, but the edge of your foot is going through more layers than your needle is. So you might want to prop that up a little bit. And I'm just going to check on my seam, and it looks like those edges are going to look great because they're perfectly aligned. So I'm going to go along the bottom edge now at my 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, last side. And we are starting at the bottom, so I'm going to need to pull out my hump jumper real quick here as we go up onto this hill. And your presser foot will appreciate the support. Okay, so next we are going to open up the seam allowance on the side of the bag like this, and open up the seam allowance at the bottom of the bag like this, and then we're going to align those seam allowances and clip those together so that we can create our boxed bottom. Okay, and we're going to do that same thing to the other side here. Just open up this seam allowance and this side seam allowance and lining those up. And now we are going to stitch across the two clipped edges at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, there's one side stitched. And we're going to do the other side now. All right, so now we have our boxed bottom and our entire exterior is closed up now. So we're going to trim our seams down, and we're going to want to trim them down by about half. And you want to stop about 1 inch away from the top of the seam here. So leave about 1 inch of space at the top of the seam allowance, leave that full length, and don't trim into it. I'll show you in a moment here. So you can see here I left the top of the seam allowance long, and I only trimmed below that point. I also didn't trim the seam allowance of where these slanted seams are. We left these long as well so that they don't unravel later, and we're going to do the same thing on this side. And you're going to do the same on the bottom. Just clipping close to where it wants to lie flat. And I don't like to clip the seam allowance where the connector is, because I feel like, one, the connector makes the seam allowance go to one side anyway, so there's no need to trim that down. And two, I don't like trimming where seams are, just in case they unravel later. It makes it just a bit less sturdy. So keep that part long in the middle, and then do the same on these boxed corner sides, where I just trim the seam allowance on the sides, and I kind of veer off when I get to that middle seam, and then do the same here. So see how I kept that seam part long? And we're going to do this same on this side. Okay. We are now going to turn our bag exterior right side out. Okay, we have now turned our exterior. You might see a little bit of wrinkles. Usually those relax out in my experience, but you do have the option of pressing from the inside again, especially if any of your decoville has lifted. On the back side here, you will have to kind of bend this connector to help it fold at the bottom here. And that way it can make that corner of the bottom easier. See how that now lies much better than it did before. And you have an exterior that has a back flap but no front flap, and that is the way that it should look for now.